So this is kind of an interesting story, and we know this because of archaeologists, okay? So we're at Custer Hill, and we don't know what happened, but this is what historians believe probably happened. That George Custer ordered his brother Tom to charge down toward the river from Custer Hill to try to push those Indians back so they could get organized. So picture this in your mind. They're at Custer Hill. It's early in the battle at Custer Hill. Custer can see the oncoming Indians, so he orders his brother Tom to take some men, Company E, and charge straight down Custer Hill toward the river to try to get the Indians, backed off. Now, how do we know this? Because when you go to the battlefield and you see those marble headstones where people fell, there's a direct line of headstones from Custer Hill down toward the river. You can just see them where people fell. Okay? Now, if you go to one area of that battlefield, you'll see that these tombstones are leading to an area known as Deep Ravine. Okay? Deep Ravine, which is on your ID sheet. So picture yourself, you're standing on top of Custer Hill, present day, and you're seeing all these white marble tombstones where people fell, yet as you look down towards the river, you see dotted white tombstones all the way down, because that's where Tom Custer and Company E's men went toward the river. Okay, and they went into an area known as Deep Ravine. So this is going to indicate that the soldiers were either killed to, or they were killed from Deep Ravine. So either Custer ordered them down from Custer Hill, or somehow they were heading up towards Custer Hill. We don't know that for sure. But I'm going to tell you what archaeologists found. Okay? Okay, archaeologists in the 80s found out a couple of things here. One, they approximated that 40 men from Company E fled from Custer Hill toward the Deep Ravine. And those are a lot of the white markers you're seeing as they go down towards the ravine. So archaeologists believe in their study that 40 troopers from Company E fled from Custer Hill toward the Deep Ravine. They were quickly finished off by the hostiles. Some of them were killed on the way down. Now, Deep Ravine is, what do you think it is?
Deep ravine.
Deep coulee. Yeah. Guess what archaeologists found in that coulee in 1983? The remains of approximately 28 soldiers that were in the ravine. What would they be doing there?
Hiding.
Hiding, probably. They could, the Indians could have killed them and then threw them in there, but that's unlikely. So what they were doing is they were fleeing to the ravine. Many were killed on the way down. The rest, I'm sure, were just... Picture yourself there with 2,000 warriors, and I'm sure they were scared and tried to hide in the ravine, and they found the remains of 28 cavalrymen in the ravine. Now this is kind of interesting. So what do they find in the ravine? Bones, etc. They also found a pearl shirt button in the Deep Ravine. A pearl shirt button. A button of a shirt that was pearl. Who would have worn such a thing in the No? Good guess. Not the infantry either. Who would wear that? Who else is left?
Custer.
What? Maybe you think Boston would, but no, it's very common for the scouts to wear shirts with pearl buttons on. Very common. Okay? So they find among the evidence in the Deep Ravine in 1983 a pearl shirt button, which probably belonged to one of the scouts. And they also found near that button a skull fragment. Piece of a skull. And when they studied the skull fragment, it was determined that whoever that belonged to had a wide cheekbone. Wide cheekbone. Okay, wide. What type of people have characteristics of wide cheekbones? What? Nope. Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Nope. Could be. Could be.
What?
What?
Isaiah.
What?
Isaiah Dorman.
No, what'd you say? Half what?
African.
He said Africans?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought he said half.
I did,
breeds.
that's what I said.
People of racially mixed upbringing normally have wider cheekbones. Who's the only one in Custer's command? Mitch Boyer. French-Canadian mother, or father, Indian mother. So they think in 1983, this might be Mitch Boyer. He's a scout with the pearl button, and he's got this skull has a wide cheekbone. Because the mother was a Sioux woman, his father was a French-Canadian fur trapper. So what they did is they analyzed and took a photo and put it all together with technology and determined without a doubt that this skull was that of Mitch Boyer. So where was Mitch Boyer in this whole thing? He was in Custer, but he was with Company E in the Deep Ravine. And that skull is in the Battlefield Museum. You'll get a chance to see it. Pretty cool. So the skull fragment was analyzed and compared to a photo of Mitch Boyer. It was a direct match. And so it's been confirmed that Mitch Boyer was killed in the flight to the Deep Ravine. So we take this whole battle of Little Bighorn. The whole battle. Okay? You've got people dead up on Calhoun Hill. You got people dead up where Keogh was. You got people dead on Custer Hill. You got people dead on the way to Deep Ravine. You got people dead in the ravine. And then you also have those people up on the bluffs with Reno, right? Who is soon to be joined by Ben Teen in the pack train. Not yet, we haven't talked about that. So who was the last man to die in the Battle of Little Bighorn? It wasn't somebody up on the bluffs, right? It had to be somebody either with Calhoun, Keogh, Custer, or Deep Ravine. Let me tell you what happened. Approximately 50 yards away from where Boyer was found, there's a lone marker right by the Deep Ravine. Now picture this in your mind. So they find Boyer, about 50 yards away from where they found Boyer, they find, if you go to Custer Battlefield, you'll see a lone marker sitting there. Never identified. That soldier was never identified. But what archaeologists did in their studies gives you kind of an interesting picture about this guy might have been the last one killed. Because let me tell you the facts. Around that lone marker, they found several military cartridges right along the lone marker, which tells you that who was probably standing there? A soldier, firing for his life. As they do the archaeological digs, they find this marker here, and they find all kinds of cartridges in this area here. As they do the area around, they find all kinds of Indian cartridges in almost a pure circle around him. Okay? And they estimated by looking at the cartridges, there's a pile here, 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 there's a pile here. So what does that tell you? Maybe a pile here. What?
Indians were surrounding him?
Yeah, but what's it tell you by the piles around it? Each pile is what? Where an Indian stood. So they're figuring 6 to 8 Indians were basically surrounding this poor guy. He's firing like crazy here, and they're finding a pile here, and a pile here, and a pile here, and they're all native cartridges. So that tells them that many of the cartridges were grouped around the soldier. Maybe 6 to 8 were firing at the trooper at that time. Now, think about this in the heat of the battle. How are we determining that this guy might be the last one?
Because the Indians are surrounded.
Yeah, they're gonna if they're really in a hell of a battle. I mean, if they can afford to have 6 to 8 Indians shooting at one guy, that tells you that the rest of the battle must be pretty much over, because they couldn't spare 6 Indians on one guy. So because of this information, this lone trooper that you see outside the Deep Ravine about 50 yards could certainly be the last man killed if you got 6 to 8 Indians shooting at one guy. Okay? Does anybody know that for sure? No, but the evidence kind of gives us some picture. Okay, another notable casualty on the way to the Deep Ravine was George E. Ford. George E. Ford. And he had something to do with Henry Porter. Who was Henry Porter, do you remember? He was the doctor that Charlie Reynolds talked to go up to the deep ravine. So what do you think that George E. Ford was? Okay, Henry Porter, Dr. Porter was the surgeon on the help. He was the assistant surgeon. And they find the body of assistant surgeon George E. Ford in that deep ravine route, on the way to the deep ravine. And there were 3 doctors that served the 7th Cavalry that day, Porter being one, and this guy, George E. Ford, being another. They find him on the way to the deep ravine. The other doctor was a doctor by the name of Dr. Lord. No, excuse me, that's not right. I'll get to that in a minute. Dr. Ford was ill on June 25th. This guy I'm talking about was ill on June 25th. And so Custer told him to stay with the pack train. The same guy they found dead en route to the deep ravine was ill on the 25th of June in the morning, and Custer said he could stay with the pack train. Evidently, he didn't take the offer, right? It's too bad he didn't, because what happens if he does? He lives. Yeah. How do we know it was Ford? How do we know it was him?
They found a surgeon.
Found his medical case. You know where they found it? In the Indian village after the battle. It was abandoned. They left it after the battle. They found his medical case in the village.
Did they
Okay?
find with the body?
No, it was in the village.
How do you know which body was it?
Yeah.
Because the other doctor was up on Reno Hill with his bag. Okay, so he's accounted, well, he's, no, okay, think about it. He's accounted for because he's got his bag up on the
How do you know he
bluffs.
was killed on the way to the deep ravine if his bag wasn't there?
Well, where else would he have been killed?
In the deep ravine, even the last dude standing there.
Not the last dude, they know it's not him. Think about that. The other doctor's up there safe and sound with his bag. Dr. Porter's up there safe and sound with his bag. That only leaves one guy, and they know it was the medical doctor sitting there in his bag, so no question. So Ford, his life is spared if he goes with the pack train and chooses not to. Okay, any question on part 2 of this? That is the notes, okay? That is the notes. Now, I'll be right back. I'm going to